Okay, so my term, Matt, right? You are running
That's right.
you're running for Congress, District 20. I can see here that you're an economics professor. So my first question to you would be, why are you running for Congress?
Well, I'm running for Congress because the big issues in District 20 are issues that I have cared about for a long, long time, both personally and professionally, both from the standpoint of having been an economics professor, as well as from the standpoint of having served as a police officer in South Florida for 11 years. The big issues here are poverty. I believe, as I see it, we need to reform the way that we approach poverty, not only in District 20, but all over the United States. The war on poverty has not been a success over the last 50 years. We also have to reform our criminal justice system. I believe that our criminal justice system, including the way we manage police officers, creates a heavy-handed environment that is not good for the development of our communities.
Okay, how would you approach poverty then? Like, what would you do different?
Well, the way that we approach poverty in the United States now is largely based on giving money away, giving money to people. And to a certain extent, some of that makes some sense. But fundamentally, you cannot give money to people and pull them out of poverty when you have an overbearing criminal justice system, when you have horrible schools, where you have high crime rates in very densely populated areas. I think the big thing that we need to do is improve our public schools and make money available for people to choose what school that they want to go to. The big reason the public schools in Broward County are so bad is because they all have little monopolies over their local areas. There is no competition. We would not tolerate monopolies in local areas in any other industry in the United States, but we tolerate monopolies when it comes to educating our kids. And I believe that it's not a coincidence that we tolerate that monopoly, and at the same time we have public schools that disappoint us all. Our public schools are not good relative to the private schools in our area. They're not good relative to public schools outside of Florida. Even elsewhere in Florida and outside of Broward, the public schools are better than what we have. So we need to make those public monies that go to public schools available so that families can choose whatever school that they want to go to and create some competition. We also need to reform our criminal justice system. We need to stop criminalizing the possession of drugs that are not addictive. We can talk about in the long run how to decriminalize all sorts of things, but we need to start out with marijuana, of course, and then stepwise progress to other drugs that are not addictive. Police will always be involved with drug problems, but we need to treat drug problems as the health problems they are and not as criminal problems.
Now, so a voter could say, you know, if I was Republican, they're gonna promote school choice, which is basically what you're promoting in the sense of education.
That's right.
If I vote Democrat, they're gonna promote criminal justice reform, you know, because
that's right. So you got to vote Libertarian so you can get both.
Okay, well, how can you convince them? Because, for example,
and the third big issue is immigration reform, by the way, which we also need to talk about. So we'll get there in a minute.
Yes, that is actually really important. But that's the thing. Like, if I'm on the left or if I support the Democrats, you know, maybe I say, okay, I might have some common ground with Mike, but if I vote for him, I'm actually helping the Republican, and the Republican can say the same. So how will you respond to that?
If I understood the question correctly, I do believe that people are drawn to the libertarian issues without realizing that they're libertarian at heart. Mm-hmm. It used to be accepted common knowledge that the United States is and was, and I believe at its heart of hearts will always remain, a libertarian nation. We do believe in tolerance. We do believe in standing up for individual rights. We do not believe in a government that controls our lives. These are the basic fundamental libertarian principles, right? And so that naturally leads you to a number of positions that are those with which most people agree. I do believe you're right that most people on the left and on the right, when they understand school choice, it's completely logical. As I said, it not only is it illogical, but if there were any other industry that behaved like public schools, it would be flatly illegal. It would be a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act as illegal restraint of trade to dominate a monopoly in your local area. And, you know, on the other hand, I do believe that the libertarian approach to immigration reform and criminal justice reform align with the way most people feel. I think most people feel that we should not be criminalizing everything. We should not be defunding the police. That was a dumb idea that some Democrats came up with, and the rest of the Democrats need to do a better job of shouting it down because it's not a good idea from the standpoint of safety or from the standpoint of getting the type of police officers we want. We want good police officers. Sometimes that means expensive police officers, but we want the flexibility to get rid of bad police officers, right? And we want to be able to hold them accountable and have the access to court when things go wrong. We want people to be able to sue when things go wrong and force police officers to obtain liability insurance, just like in any other high liability profession. You know, surgeons have to get malpractice insurance. Police officers ought to as well. That's a system that we like. We don't like it when things go wrong, but we need to have a system that helps us seek redress in court when they do go wrong. That's the way it works in other industries. It's the way we want police officers to work too. Most Americans don't believe in hauling off drug addicts to jail when what they need is to go to a hospital and get into a program, right? And I do believe that most Americans believe in the type of immigration reform that libertarians talk about, which is a much, much more pro-immigrant nation. We need more immigration. We need to treat our immigrants with greater dignity. And we need to do a better job of managing our border so that we don't force people into these horribly dangerous situations, undignified situations, force people to wait years for paperwork. It's insane.
Now, one argument regarding immigration, especially used by Republicans, right, is that it actually affects in a negative way, like to certain levels of, how will you say that? Let's say it affects in a negative way some workers, right? Because that means more people from other countries are coming here. They charge less for the same work. So that actually is putting the salaries, you know, like below a certain point. So you're affecting the American citizens, right? So America
that is
first.
The Republican argument. As a practical matter, I can tell you as an economist, you don't actually get much of that. Okay. You don't get much wage reduction just because you bring in more people to work. And to the extent to which wages are affected, the reason they're affected is because we're not attracting capital fast enough. In other words, to maintain our wage rates, we need to attract capital at the same rate at which we attract labor. It's the ratio of capital to labor that drives the wage rate. And capital comes from two different places. Number one, human capital comes from good schools. So again, we need to do a better job of educating our kids to beef up those wage rates. Now, that's number one. That's the most important thing. Number two, we need to attract investment into the United States. And the way you do that is by creating the environment in which people want to invest. Not only people who are already in the United States, but people who are outside the United States. We want to attract them to our nation to start businesses and to make investments in businesses that are already here. That means keeping our corporate tax rate low. The corporate tax rate is arguably the dumbest at least in the top two, dumbest public policy in the United States. It's a tough argument whether the dumbest is to have an educational monopoly over every town, but certainly in the top two, our education monopoly and the fact that we tax corporate profits. If we want to tax rich people, go ahead and tax rich people. But let's not kid ourselves that we're taxing rich people when we tax corporate profits. It's not the case. When you tax companies, you discourage investment, you lower the wage rate, you drive up the price of goods and services that all of us consume. So that's a bad idea. So we need to create an environment in which we improve our investments and at the same time bring in labor. That's how to keep up the wage rate.
Now, there is something really interesting here, because I agree with you that maybe some people, or most of the people maybe are attracted to libertarian ideas without knowing it, right? So why libertarians never actually win elections? Why they don't have an important representation in Congress, as governors, mayors? Why is happening?
Because our nation started out libertarian with a lowercase L, not with the Libertarian Party, right? The Constitution is a libertarian document. It basically says we're going to leave each other alone and we don't want government to get too big. We formed our big two parties, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, over a century. And they were at their heart not so different from espousing libertarian ideals, positions, principles. But over time, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have drifted away from our libertarian origins. Now we're moving closer and closer in various ways to government control, toward socialism, toward larger government intervention. And that's why it's time now for the Libertarian Party to grow, to push our principles, which are not new. They're, good old-fashioned American principles. They're just being overrun by the Democratic and Republican Party's interests in maintaining their own power.
Yeah. And another thing that happens when people want to, maybe they want to vote libertarian, but they think, that is wasting my vote, right? That is an argument that you hear all the time. I actually agree with him more, but that would be wasting my vote. What would you tell those people?
You're wasting your vote anytime you do either one of the following two. Either when you vote for someone just because you think they're going to win. If they're going to win, why are you voting for them? They're already going to win without your vote. So if you're voting because you want to vote for a winner, just stay home, right? This isn't a casino. We're not betting. This isn't a casino wager. You're supposed to be voting on your principle. And that's the second way you can waste your vote, is by not voting for your principles. If a Democratic candidate aligns with your principles, then vote for him or her. If a Republican aligns with your principles, then vote for him or her. If a libertarian, however, is the one that most represents your principles, that is for whom you should vote. Because remember, in the long run, you're not voting for people. In the long run, you're not voting for individuals. In the great span of history, if you look at it over a 20 or 200 year period of time, you're voting for principles. You're voting for ideas. That's what you should be voting for. If you vote for a libertarian today because you believe in libertarian ideals, then people will notice. And next time they'll say, well, the libertarian got quite a few votes. I guess it's because people do vote for their principles. I should too. That's how movements begin, not by electing individuals. I certainly hope no one is going to vote Libertarian this year because of me. Don't vote for me. Don't vote because I'm a cop. Don't vote for me because I'm an economist, right? Don't vote for me because I'm a guy or white or have gray hair and I'm 60. Or I vote, don't vote for me because I speak English. I mean, there's all kinds of stupid reasons to vote for someone. Don't do that. If you want to vote for me, it should be because you believe in libertarian principles. You agree that the government is getting too big, spending too much money, spending money too casually. It's become too intrusive in our lives. Our military is too big, too aggressive. Our immigration policy is a mess. We're representing ourselves to the world as if we don't care about immigration anymore, which has got to be wrong. Vote for me because you agree with these principles.
Immigrants, they tend to vote or to support the Democratic Party because they're, the pro-immigration party, right? Some of them actually end up supporting the Republican Party because they tend to be tougher, like for example, I'm from Venezuela. So the Republicans are tougher on the Venezuelan regime, Cubans the same, Nicaraguans, they
right.
think like kind of similar. So how can you convince Hispanics, specifically Hispanics?
If you're an immigrant or if you believe in immigration, you don't have to be an immigrant, by the way, to believe in immigration. Immigration is good for everybody. It's good for our culture. It's good for our economy. It's good for our government budget. So anyway, if you're pro-immigration, you're right. You could vote for a Democrat or you could vote for a Libertarian. However, if you believe that you want to stand up against socialism here and abroad, then you really want to vote for Libertarian instead of a Republican. A Republican is going to be much, much more likely to believe in American imperialism. A Libertarian does not. A Libertarian believes in capitalism, in democracy, in individual rights, and in spreading the message of these rights around the world, including to Venezuela and Cuba. But a libertarian is not an imperialist. I'm not going to sit here and give you a lecture on how many times American interventionism has gone wrong. But let's just say dozens of times, even in my lifetime. Many times in your lifetime, but dozens and dozens of times in my lifetime, all over Latin America, all over the Middle East, occasionally in Europe and Asia. And it's not because Americans who espouse imperialism don't mean well. They mean well. They actually believe that us imposing by force our principles and values on everybody else will be good for them. Unfortunately, they're wrong. As a practical matter, you cannot spread democracy with force, with militarism, through imperialism. It doesn't work as a practical matter. You can spread the message, and that's what libertarians do, and then show support for burgeoning democracies around the world.
And finally, what message would you send to the undecided voters?
To the undecided voters, I would say the reason you're undecided is because both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have disappointed you in the past as well as recently. You should be voting for your principles. I may or may not win. I may win, but we all win when we vote for our principles. If we can show the world that we are tired of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party drifting away from the principles that we agree with, drifting away from the principles on which America was founded, away from tolerance and standing up for individual rights, if we can show that by voting libertarian, then we can make real change. Not by Tuesday at 3 o'clock kind of change, but the kind of change that takes time. But this is the time for us to get started.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. It was a pleasure to interview you.
Thank you. I wish you a lot of luck. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
And I wish you a lot of luck too on the election.